Krystal, what are you taking a look at?
Well, guys, the story had everything to make it catnip for right-wing media. According to the New York Post, about 24 homeless veterans had been kicked out of an upstate New York hotel called the Crossroads in order to free up space for migrant asylum seekers. Now, the head of that nonprofit group, Sharon Tony Finch, relayed the harrowing tale to the New York Post. She said, "One of the vets called me on Sunday. He told me he had to leave because the hotel said the extended stay is not available. Then I got another call. We didn't waste any time," the advocate said. "That's when we started on Monday to organize when and where to move them all. I am glad you called me today," she told the Post. "Last night I was crying." Now, the conservative media ecosystem quickly picked up the story. They ran wild with it. A columnist at the Post said Joe Biden should, quote, burn in hell for this. Fox News in particular, of course, they leaned in heavily to this too perfect tale of illegal immigrants supplanting men who had served our country on outnumbered. Hosts said the incident proved Biden was a liar when he said God bless the troops, and that he's, quote, more concerned about the needs of the UN, about the World Economic Forum, than he is about his own American citizens. Just one little tiny problem. Turned out the whole thing was a complete hoax cooked up by a right-wing Jussie Smollett to fan the flames of the nation's media-fueled culture wars. A local paper, the Mid-Hudson News, actually exposed the entire scam. First, they did the most basic act of journalism, which either Fox or the New York Post could have done before running with a story that had absolutely no backing. They called the hotel that was supposedly at the center of this veterans booted for migrants story, found they denied every aspect of it completely. The hotel did actually have some asylum seekers as guests, but no one had been kicked out for them. And in fact, they had plenty of rooms available to accommodate veterans or anyone else who wanted to stay there. A second hotel in Fishkill, New York, where the veterans were supposedly relocated, also denied the basics of the story. Next, you had a Republican state lawmaker who had taken up the mantle of advocating for these supposedly displaced veterans, admitted to the paper that appeared the whole story was fake after the head of that nonprofit, originally quoted by the Post, was unable to produce any evidence of his veracity, and then ultimately ghosted him. And to put the final nail in the coffin here, the paper then identified homeless men who'd been recruited by that nonprofit head, Sharon Tony Finch, with food, alcohol, and the promise of a cash payment to lie and pretend that they were the men who had been kicked out of the hotel. According to the Mid-Hudson News, one of the men said Finch told them they were going to a meeting where she would be explaining how they'd been kicked out of a hotel to make room for migrants. She told us to act like we were the veterans that had been displaced. And she told us that if asked, we were supposed to say we had been kicked out and Sharon found us rooms in Fishkill. He also noted that men who were unwilling to answer were told to respond with, "I am too traumatized to talk about it," if asked. In the end, this lady did not even give these men the $200 cash payment she had lured them with. Now, after Fox spent hours flogging the story in emotional language, they attempted to clean up their mess with a couple of short corrections. You can bet millions of people who heard the original story, they will never hear that it all turned out to be a complete and utter hoax. Workers for the hotel at the center of the lie, they have been besieged by irate phone calls and physical threats. Now, the sad thing is, this wasn't even close to the only national culture war story that was revealed as a hoax just in the last week. A Senate candidate who had claimed that he witnessed child sex trafficking while working at an adult bookstore, he was forced to retract his story and admit he had lied. In a sworn affidavit after being charged with making a false statement, he confessed, quote, "On April 9th, 2022, I went to work at the Mistress. When I arrived at work, I noticed a young girl and an elderly male in the store near the ATM. I immediately recognized this as an opportunity to potentially obtain traction for my political career." He continues, "I used the opportunity to take photographs of a child and send it to my followers. This is a topic of serious concern amongst my voter base, and I intentionally brought attention to a situation that simply did not occur." Goes on to express regret for slandering an investigating law enforcement officer, potentially endangering the child that he photographed, and causing cops to spend hundreds of hours investigating what was a fake crime. There was also a viral video incident involving a supposedly racist Karen fighting over a rental bike with a group of young black men. She was accused by famous civil rights attorney Ben Crump of attempting to steal the bike from these young black men. He wrote on Instagram, this is Crump, quote, "She grossly tried to weaponize her tears to paint this man as a threat. This is exactly the type of behavior that has endangered so many black men in the past." Well, turns out the instant judgment might have been exactly backwards. This nurse, who was 6 months pregnant, provided receipts to the Independent showing she had paid for the bike in question, a fact that was not shown in the video, which led to her being smeared nationally as a racist and also being put on leave from her job as a nurse. According to her lawyer, she paid for the bike, was then heckled and harassed by the young men who physically pushed her and the bike back into the docking station, causing it to relock. One of the men, which you can see in the video, then covered up the QR code on the bike rack to prohibit her from checking that bike out again. So instead of a racist Karen, this video might actually show the tail end of a pregnant nurse being mocked, harassed, and intimidated by a group of young men. Now, we didn't cover any of these stories, not because we're such geniuses that we can intuitively spot every fake the instant it hits the partisan press, but because we try not to do news analysis by anecdote. After all, let's say that the racist Karen incident was true. Does one white lady being fragile and manipulative really tell us anything more broadly about the country? Factually grounded anecdotes, they can be useful to help give color to established facts, data, policy, or they can also be useful to help formulate a hypothesis that you then test. But on their own, they're mostly just propaganda, mostly emotional manipulation. Unfortunately, too, we have become a nation of easy marks. Millions of culture war poisoned brains just primed for the next viral video or anecdote to confirm what we think we already know, with media ghouls ready to cherry-pick stories to reinforce our elaborate mind palaces, and fame-hungry charlatans ready to outright concoct narratives that are tailor-made to draw us in with irresistible culture war bait. Pundits and influencers ready to pounce in order to boost their own clout, too. And this is all before AI-generated deep fakes thoroughly flood the zone, making it even more difficult to separate fact from fiction. Be wary of these too perfect culture war flashpoint stories. Reject the news outlets that routinely traffic in them, and be especially skeptical when a story matches up with your existing worldview a little bit too perfectly. This homeless veterans one, you think it— Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.